San Francisco International Airport, September 1972. 9:15 in the morning. The terminal is loud, the way airports are loud on Saturday mornings, when half a dozen domestic flights are boarding simultaneously, and the check-in area has become a slow-motion collision of luggage and impatience, and the specific anxiety of people who are running late for things that matter to them. The air smells of jet fuel and vending machine coffee, and the particular tension of a space where hundreds of strangers are forced into proximity without choosing it. The United Airlines check-in queue stretches back from the counter in a loose, rope-guided line, maybe 20 people deep, shifting and shuffling with the restless energy of travelers who have somewhere to be and no good way to get there faster. Bruce Lee is third in line. He is wearing a black leather jacket over a white shirt, dark trousers, sunglasses that partially conceal his face. He is carrying a gray Samson suitcase containing 3 days of clothing and documents for producer meetings in Los Angeles. He looks like a man who has done this many times and has made peace with the waiting. His posture is relaxed. His weight is centered. He is not looking at his watch. A few people in the queue have noticed him. Murmurs passing down the line. That's the guy from the Green Hornet. The whispers move and dissolve without becoming anything larger. Bruce does not acknowledge them. He moves forward as the line moves forward. He is simply a man waiting to check a bag on a Saturday morning in September 1972. The bodybuilder arrives at 9:22. He is 28 years old, 6 feet 1 inch, 265 pounds. Amateur heavyweight competitor out of San Jose, 6 years of obsessive ironwork that has built a 52-inch chest and arms measuring 22 inches that strain the sleeves of the tight white tank top he is wearing despite the September morning chill, because the arms are the point. The arms are always the point with men like this. He has a face that has grown accustomed to the particular deference that very large men receive in public spaces. The small unconscious adjustments other people make when serious mass is moving in their direction. He has spent 6 years mistaking this deference for respect. It is not respect. It is physics. It is the simple biological instinct of smaller organisms making room for larger ones. He does not know the difference between fear and admiration and has never needed to learn it, because the result in public spaces looks identical from where he stands. He is running late for his flight. His companion, a similarly built man in his late 20s, is half a step behind him, both moving through the terminal with the easy confidence of people who have never been seriously inconvenienced by a crowd in their lives, because crowds have always adjusted to them rather than the other way around. He begins moving along the length of the check-in queue, the way a large ship moves through a narrow channel, using displacement rather than invitation. He shoulders past the first person in line, a businessman with a briefcase who steps aside without protest. He shoulders past the second, an older woman who pulls her bag to her chest and says nothing. He reaches Bruce Lee and applies the same pressure, the same lateral push with the shoulder, the same wordless assumption that the smaller body will yield to the larger one, because that is simply how the physics of public spaces work. Bruce does not move. He shifts his weight slightly, rotates his body perhaps 2 or 3 degrees, and the push finds no purchase, no leverage, no compliance. He continues looking toward the counter as though nothing has touched him, because in any meaningful sense nothing has. The bodybuilder stops. He has not encountered this before, not in this situation, not from someone this size. He looks at Bruce with the expression of a man whose simple arithmetic has just produced an impossible result, and who is not yet sure whether to recalculate or insist on his original answer. "Hey, I need to get through," Big guy coming, move it. Bruce does not turn around immediately. He continues facing forward. When he does turn, he does so slowly and completely, giving the bodybuilder his full attention with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who is not afraid of what they are turning to face. He looks up at the man from behind his sunglasses for a moment, then removes the sunglasses and folds them into his jacket pocket with the same careful economy he applies to everything. The line is for everyone, Bruce says. His voice is calm and perfectly level, not loud, not aggressive, simply clear, the way a fact is clear. Wait your turn. The bodybuilder blinks. He has expected one of several responses from the smaller man: compliance, apology, nervous laughter, the immediate physical yielding that his size normally produces without requiring words. He has not expected this. The calmness of it is more disorienting than aggression would have been. He looks at Bruce for a moment, then at his own arms, then back at Bruce, running the comparison that his mind has been trained by 6 years of gym culture to run automatically. He sees 140 pounds, maybe 150 with the jacket. He sees arms that are functional but not impressive. He sees someone who should, by every physical metric he has learned to trust, be moving out of his way right now. "Buddy," he says, and his voice carries the patronizing patience of a man explaining something obvious to someone slow. "I'm twice your size. Move, or I'll move you." Bruce responds without changing his expression, without raising his voice, without shifting his weight in any way that could be read as preparation for violence. He simply says, "Try." One word, not a threat, an invitation. A door opened with perfect courtesy into a room the bodybuilder is not equipped to enter. The airline employee at the counter intervenes at this point, as airline employees are trained to do, with the specific combination of authority and appeasement that customer service requires. "Gentlemen, please. There are no confrontations here. Everyone will be served in order. Please maintain your positions in the queue." The bodybuilder steps back. His ego is not injured yet, merely delayed. He positions himself behind Bruce and waits with the specific impatience of a man who has decided he will find another opportunity to establish the hierarchy that this small, unreasonable person has temporarily disrupted. The opportunity presents itself when Bruce reaches the counter and places his suitcase on the scale. The suitcase is not fully latched, because Bruce had been organizing documents in it while waiting and had not resecured the clasp completely. The bodybuilder, standing directly behind him, sees this. What happens next is technically possible to describe as an accident. A large foot moving clumsily in a crowded space, making contact with luggage on the floor. That is one description. The other description is that the bodybuilder deliberately drives his foot into the side of Bruce's suitcase with enough force to knock it off the scale and send it skidding across the linoleum, the unlatched clasp giving way, the contents spilling across the terminal floor. 2 shirts, a pair of training trousers, personal items, spreading across the floor of San Francisco International Airport on a Saturday morning in September 1972, while 40 people watch and the bodybuilder laughs out loud. The specific laugh of a man who has found a way to assert dominance while maintaining plausible deniability. Then he says it. He turns to his companion and says it at a volume calculated to reach Bruce and everyone within 10 meters without quite becoming a shout. "Look at the little Chinese guy picking up his garbage. Should learn not to be in the way of bigger people." The companion laughs. A few other people nearby look away. The airline employee behind the counter goes very still. Bruce Lee does not react visibly. He kneels down on the linoleum floor of the terminal and begins picking up his clothing with movements that are deliberate and unhurried. The movements of a man who has decided exactly how he is going to respond to this situation and is in no rush to get there. He folds the first shirt carefully, as though he is in his bedroom at home with nowhere to be. He folds the second. He places the training trousers on top. He picks up each personal item individually and places it back in the suitcase. The bodybuilder's laughter continues for a while and then begins to thin at the edges as the silence from Bruce stretches longer than expected. The laughter requires a reaction to sustain itself. Bruce is not providing one. The bodybuilder fills the silence with another comment, something to his companion about how some people just don't understand that the world has a natural order. But the words have less conviction than before. Bruce finishes repacking his suitcase. He stands up. He closes the clasp with a clean, decisive click. He turns and faces the bodybuilder directly with the complete, unhurried attention of someone who has finished everything they needed to finish and now has time for this. The 40 people in the surrounding area who have been watching this unfold go completely quiet. The airline employee behind the counter stops typing. Even the ambient noise of the terminal seems to pull back slightly, the way sound behaves in a large space when something is about to happen that demands attention. Bruce speaks clearly and without performance, projecting his voice not through volume, but through precision, each word landing exactly where it is aimed. "You're going to apologize," he says, "or I'm going to demonstrate why size without skill is just dead weight." He says it the way a physician states a diagnosis, not as a threat, as an assessment of the available facts. The bodybuilder stares at him for a long moment. He runs the calculation again. 140 pounds, 5 feet 7 inches, arms that are not particularly impressive. He has done this calculation before, and it has always produced the same answer, and the answer has always been correct, and there is no reason, no physical reason that he can identify, why this situation should be any different. He decides the situation is not different. He smiles at his companion. Then he takes one step toward Bruce and extends his right hand toward Bruce's chest, open-palmed. The dominant push that establishes hierarchy without technically crossing into assault. The move that has ended a dozen minor confrontations in his favor without ever requiring him to actually fight anyone. The hand never reaches Bruce's chest. What happens in the next 5 seconds is this. In the first second, Bruce's left hand intercepts the incoming push at the wrist, not blocking it with force, but redirecting it outward in a motion so smooth and economical that several witnesses later describe it as looking like the bodybuilder's own arm simply changed its mind about where it was going. In the second second, Bruce's right leg generates a sidekick that travels from its chambered position to the bodybuilder's solar plexus in a time that the human eye cannot follow reliably. The power in that kick is not generated by the size of the muscles involved, it is generated by the kinetic chain, legs pushing against the floor, hips rotating, torso contracting, all of it channeling momentum through the extended leg into a contact point approximately 2 inches square at the precise anatomical location where the impact will be most efficiently transferred to the diaphragm. Bruce's 140 pounds, when focused through that chain into that point, exceeds anything that 265 pounds of untrained mass can produce in a comparable movement. In the third second, the impact reaches the bodybuilder's diaphragm. The diaphragm goes into spasm. The bodybuilder's mouth opens. No sound comes out because no air is moving in either direction. His hands go instinctively to his midsection. the ancient reflex of a body trying to protect the site of injury after the injury has already occurred. In the fourth second, Bruce's left leg sweeps the bodybuilder's support leg at the precise moment when all 265 pounds of the man's weight is committed to that leg due to the destabilization caused by the kick. The geometry is simple. Remove the only remaining support at the moment when the center of gravity is already displaced. And the result is not a fall, it is a collapse. Total and immediate and inevitable. In the fifth second, 265 pounds of bodybuilder meets the linoleum floor of San Francisco International Airport with an impact that travels through the terminal like a minor geological event, reverberating in the bones of every person standing within 20 feet. He lands on his back, arms and legs extended without control, completely conscious and completely unable to do anything about his situation, which is the floor, the inability to breathe, and the 40 people watching him from above. Bruce Lee does not follow him to the ground. He does not stand over him. He does not say anything. He turns back to the airline counter, picks up his suitcase, and addresses the agent, who is standing with both hands flat on the counter, and an expression that suggests her training did not include a protocol for this specific situation. "Excuse the interruption," Bruce says. "My bag is within the weight limit." The agent looks at the scale. "Yes?" she says, in a voice that is operating on automatic pilot, while her conscious mind catches up with what it just witnessed. 42 pounds. Well within the limit. She prints the boarding pass. Her hands are not entirely steady, but she manages it. Bruce takes the pass, thanks her, and walks toward the seating area with the unhurried calm of a man who has completed his check-in and has some time before his flight. Behind him, the bodybuilder is beginning the slow process of recovering the ability to breathe. It takes almost 2 full minutes before he can sit up. His companion is crouched beside him, asking questions that the bodybuilder cannot yet answer because answering requires air, and air is still arriving in shallow, painful increments. When he finally gets vertical, assisted by his companion's arm, he looks around the terminal for Bruce. Not with the intention of continuing anything. With the expression of a man who has just had a fundamental assumption about the world corrected in the most direct way available, and is still in the early stages of processing the correction. He had believed for 6 years that 265 pounds of muscle was a reliable source of dominance in physical confrontations. That belief is gone. It has been removed with the same efficiency and economy with which everything else just happened. What replaces it is not yet clear to him. That will take longer. But the absence of the old belief is already complete. 3 people approach Bruce in the waiting area before boarding begins. The first is a karate instructor in a business suit, a man in his mid-40s who has spent 15 years teaching martial arts in San Jose and who introduces himself with the specific deference of a professional encountering someone operating at a level above his own. "Mr. Lee," he says, "I have been teaching for 15 years, and I have never seen a more perfect demonstration of economy of movement. The sidekick was instantaneous, and the timing of the sweep was precise beyond anything I could explain to my students without showing them that exact sequence. Would you be willing to tell me what system that was?" Bruce responds with the genuine humility of someone who has thought carefully about these questions for a long time. "It wasn't a specific system," he says. "It was the application of principles. Intercept the attack during preparation, before it has generated momentum. Strike the center of mass at the point where damage is maximized. Use the opponent's committed weight against him with the sweep. Those principles work regardless of the system you practice. The system is the vehicle. The principles are what actually function." The instructor nods slowly, writing something in a small notebook he has produced from his jacket pocket. Bruce watches him write with an expression of quiet satisfaction, the satisfaction of a teacher who has found a student paying genuine attention. The second person is a young woman, perhaps 25, who had been standing directly behind Bruce in the check-in queue and who approaches him with the slightly unsteady quality of someone whose adrenaline is still processing. "I needed to see that," she says. "That man was intimidating everyone in that line. The way he pushed past people, his comments, his whole attitude, he was treating every person in that queue like they were obstacles. I was preparing myself for when he reached me, because I knew he was going to push me too." She pauses. "Thank you for not accepting it. Not just for yourself." Bruce looks at her for a moment before responding. "I didn't do it to be a hero," he says. "I did it because that behavior, casual racism, using physical size to intimidate people who are smaller, the assumption that you can take what you want because you're large enough to take it, those things corrode something important. They replace respect with fear, and a culture based on fear is worse for everyone in it, including the people doing the intimidating, because they never learn what they actually are without the intimidation propping them up." The woman is quiet for a moment. "What is he without it?" she asks. "Less than he thinks," Bruce says, "which is the real lesson, not what happened to him on the floor, what he discovers next." The third person is an older man, perhaps 65, who moves with the particular economy of someone who has carried serious weight for a long time and has learned to move efficiently with it. He identifies himself as a Korean War veteran, and his voice carries the specific texture of a man who has seen enough of human capacity for violence to have formed real opinions about it. "Son," he says, and the word comes without condescension. It is simply the word he uses for men younger than himself who have earned his attention. "I saw combat in Korea, all kinds, rifles, knives, hand-to-hand in conditions that I won't describe in an airport. What you did just now was textbook effective. Minimum force required, maximum effect, clean termination of threat, without escalation beyond the point of necessity. You stopped when the threat was neutralized. You didn't continue." He pauses, looking at Bruce with the direct assessment of someone who evaluates these things professionally, even decades after the profession ended. "That kind of discipline is rarer than the technique," he says. "Most men who can fight keep fighting past the point of necessity because the adrenaline demands it. You stopped on a dime." Bruce receives this for a moment before responding. "The goal in real confrontation is never to destroy the opponent," he says. "The goal is to end the threat. The moment the threat ends, continuing is no longer defense. It becomes something else. And that something else creates problems, legal and moral, that the original defense did not create. The discipline of stopping is as important as the skill of acting." 15 minutes before boarding, 2 airport security officers approach Bruce in the waiting area. The senior officer, a man in his 40s with the expression of someone who has genuinely seen everything in 2 decades of airport work, identifies himself and explains that they have received a report of a physical altercation in the check-in area and that multiple witnesses have named Bruce. He asks for an account of what happened. Bruce provides one, without embellishment or omission, in the same level tone he uses for everything. The empoujon in the queue, the deliberate kick to the suitcase, the racist comment delivered at sufficient volume for 10 people to hear clearly, the attempted dominant push, and his response to it. The officer takes notes and asks Bruce to wait while they speak with witnesses. They speak with 6. They return after 10 minutes, and the senior officer's expression has shifted slightly towards something that could be described as professional respect. "Every witness confirms your account," he says. "Multiple people describe the other individual as the clear aggressor and confirm that you made verbal attempts at resolution before any physical contact occurred. You are technically within your rights to file assault charges against him." Bruce considers this for a moment, genuinely, not as performance. "No," he says, finally. "I want to take my flight. If he learned something today, that is sufficient." The point of the situation was the lesson, not the punishment. The bodybuilder did not file charges. His companion explained to the security officers, in a tone that carried the specific embarrassment of someone managing a situation they want to end, that his friend had decided not to pursue the matter. The real reason, which the companion did not state, but which the security officers understood from context, was that the bodybuilder could not construct a version of the story that did not require explaining how he had ended up on the floor of the terminal after attempting to push a man who weighed 60 pounds less than he did. Any version of that story that he told in any official capacity would follow him. So he said nothing. He and his companion took a later flight. The bodybuilder spent the entire journey in silence, looking out the window at the clouds over California, turning over the 5 seconds in a mind that was not yet equipped to fully process them, but would keep returning to them for years. Years later, a bodybuilding magazine published an anonymous interview with a competitor who described learning the difference between aesthetic strength and functional strength through a public confrontation that humiliated him in front of 40 strangers. He described the experience not with bitterness, but with the rueful honesty of a man who had been given an education he didn't ask for and couldn't refuse. "I had spent 6 years building a body that looked dangerous," he said. "I found out in 5 seconds that looking dangerous and being dangerous are completely different things. The man who taught me that lesson didn't say a word afterward. He just picked up his boarding pass and walked away. That was the part that stayed with me the longest. Not the technique. The fact that, for him, it was just something that needed to be dealt with, like checking a bag. Something routine. I had been walking around for 6 years thinking my size made me special in a fight. For him, my size was just a Tuesday morning at the airport." He went on to describe beginning boxing training the following month, not to become a fighter, but to understand the difference between muscle that performs and muscle that functions, between the body as display and the body as instrument. The training, he said, changed everything about how he understood himself and how he moved through the world. Bruce spoke about the incident 3 months later in an interview with Black Belt magazine when asked about the difference between gymnasium strength and functional combat strength. His answer was characteristically direct and carried the quality of someone who has thought about a question for 20 years and has arrived at the clearest possible version of the answer. "Large muscle can generate force in isolated movements," he said. "Bench press, curl, squat. Those are impressive in their context. But combat is not isolated movement. Combat is kinetic chain, the entire body coordinating in fractions of a second. Each segment contributing to a total force that exceeds what any single muscle group could produce alone. The man at the airport could almost certainly bench press 300 pounds. That is genuinely impressive. But he could not generate meaningful force in a sidekick because he had never trained the kinetic chain of a kick. His muscle was present. His nervous system did not know how to use it in that context. The muscle was there. The coordination was absent. And in the 5 seconds that mattered, coordination was the only thing that mattered." He paused before continuing, the pause of someone choosing words with care. People train their bodies to look strong because strength that is visible gets a response. In the gym, in public, in the mirror. That response feels like power. But visible strength and functional strength are related the way a photograph of a fire is related to an actual fire. One looks like the thing. One is the thing. At the airport that morning, he brought a photograph. I brought a fire. 5 seconds. That is the number that defines this story and the reason it travels. 5 seconds from the moment the bodybuilder extended his hand to push until he was on the floor of San Francisco International Airport, unable to breathe. 5 seconds that contained within them the entire argument between size and skill, between mass and precision, between the body as intimidation and the body as instrument. 5 seconds that taught 40 witnesses something about the difference between looking powerful and being powerful, something that most of them had sensed in the abstract, but had never seen demonstrated with such clarity in such a public and ordinary place. A check-in queue on a Saturday morning, a gray suitcase, a boarding pass, a man who had somewhere to be and simply needed to deal with something that was in the way before he got there. The bodybuilder brought everything he had built in 6 years of daily work. Bruce Lee brought 20 years of daily work. The difference between those two kinds of work was visible in 5 seconds in a way that no amount of explanation could have made as clear. And 50 years later, every time someone in a gym confuses the size of a muscle with the capability of the body that contains it, the lesson is still waiting to be learned. Some lessons require a certain kind of teacher. Some teachers appear in airports on Saturday mornings, wearing leather jackets, carrying gray suitcases, waiting patiently in line for their turn at the counter, and dealing with whatever needs to be dealt with before the flight departs, quietly, completely. And then, moving on.